Hi, I'm Jes Parent and I help run JOPRO. What you're about to watch is a conversation from one of our longest running groups, the Cognition Futures Reading Group. For a few years, a handful of us met almost every week. The first meeting was way back in 2022 of the reading group proper. The working group was formed a year or two before that. And we met weekly to read and argue about how minds work, where the study of cognition is actually headed, and all the strange places that those questions lead. Things around phenomenology, cybernetics, complexity, development, AI. We ran well over 80 sessions back in the day. It kind of merged with a cybernetics discussion group as well. And then life happened. People moved away. People went to grad school, started some other things. And the group was quiet for the last year or so. What you're about to see next, is us coming back together with some new folks kind of chiming in as well. It isn't a lecture or finished result. It's basically a reunion, and a fairly honest one. People are catching up, comparing what they've been doing and what they've been chasing, feeling out what a new session of this could be. If you want a sense of where we are and the questions we're drawn to, this is a good window in. Here's the group, and great to have you stop by and check us out. We'll have more of these public discussion sessions coming your way soon. And as always, you can find out more on our website and sign up for public events and other interests there and in our newsletter. Take care. I don't know if anybody else wants to go. Like, well, where were you in the last 2 years? Like, what's your backstory? If we all met up in the Dungeons and Dragons adventure sense, we all kept meeting at the inn after years apart on our own side quests, and now we're back here. What have you been up to the last year or so?
Highlights real working has some health issues that I had to focus on. Otherwise, I've been focusing on pet personality typology projects. I've been working on game dev adjacent skills. Cognitive science as applied to AI is alongside wanting to learn more about digital narrativity and
I was just pulling up this. Like, Avery is sort of the reason
AI
DigiNEST
alignment.
but it's sort of a subgroup that Avery co-founded with me. We have a weekly meeting since November. Amali's been a big part of it. Kat Chang from Plot Twisters. For those who don't know, myself, Kat Chang, and Avery are all affiliated with Plot Twisters. I'm newer relative to Kat and Jenny. Jenny's the founder. Kat's been kind of doing there's been some overlap in the last year or so on different things. And we all kind of this piece was basically just hey, what are we kind of about? We talk about the reflection agency paper, but Avery's kind of had their own interest in personality stuff. Allostatic kinds work has kind of come up, and I was also going to show.
Recently, we've been focusing on machine interpretability and talking about what actually can the current generative models actually cognitively do versus like the one end being like they're straight just repeating superficial patterns, the other end like a human. The answer seems more in the middle.
Yeah, in the other group, we've been looking at some papers like this paper, a couple anthropic papers recently. So Avery's kind of been definitely in the I'm interested in AI, LLMs, technology space as a means by which to explore computation, explore some personality stuff.
Yeah.
This can be a useful working group of people on these topics. So that's sort of Avery's stuff. Do Amanda or Bradly want to say, or if anything else you want to say before we move on, Avery?
I'm generally interested in learning more about cognitive science and adjacent topics and theory. I think it'd definitely be helpful to help motivate me to read and rigorously explore underlying frameworks that are modeling the process of the mind. So yeah, I'm pretty flexible about readings and stuff.
Briefly before anyone else goes, I also mentioned Kat here. Kat's currently on a several-month sabbatical type situation. So I actually just spoke with her. I was at a cafe this morning picking out Japanese tea, and she was in Japan right now.
Oh, that's fun.
I'm mentioning her here because it would fit into this discussion. Well, I don't quite remember, but she's interested. She actually asked, I wanted to learn more about phenomenology, particularly like Heidegger phenomenology type stuff. So like, what work should you recommend? Or what are seminal things in your group that you discuss? So she's asked us about that. I don't know that she'll ever be able to join our group, but as someone who's kind of in our range of Plot Twisters and DigiNEST stuff and has a background in cognitive science, she's part of Plot Twisters, and they've looked a lot about like research-informed things on learning and growing and internal things and like narrative development. So that's a small plug for Kat. Would you like to go, Amanda? Or
I don't have too much of a professional update. I feel like I haven't been up to much of anything regarding this stuff, and I miss it. That's why I wanted to get back into it. I haven't been able to replace it because I've since moved to France. I have a work visa now, like I can work here, but I haven't tried to infiltrate that kind of job scene. It's different, and I would have to get myself together first.
well, if we can all prepare you to deal with discussing nerdy things that might help you, you're in the right place for that. You've been in France for a while now. I think since we last were here, you've become married, so congratulations on that.
Thank you.
As soon as Amanda popped up, I'm like, okay. I'm like, I need to reach out to Amanda and try to get Amanda involved in something, because Amanda has a very important perspective on things that I want to center and give space for. So I'm glad that you've joined us so far. And yeah, it's kind of interesting to be here because I guess this is December 25th of 2024. It's so funny to me that in our old notes, the first diagram we see is the 1943, again, with pulled directly from Levin. We were mentioning our friend Tony Shimero, historical context of different papers. This might have been before I made my big Substack post that I constantly throw at everybody about the 1943 paper as well. World modeling references. Yeah, this is the paper that probably kind of came from some of those discussions. Bradly shared this with the Good Regulator paper. We talked about that. Also, we talked about the dynamical cognitive science, Wherefore Art Thou, which is sort of maybe a slight reference or homage to. Here's the paper that I'm mentioning. This paper is sort of the Nunez piece that was like, hey, did it go in a direction? This was the more recent Raja paper. We looked at some Raja papers in the past as well that were interested in Amanda like. That's kind of our mini strands in the past. I don't know if Bradly wants to say.
Hello. I've been working on doing our Saturday meetings and doing a fair number of cybernetics papers covering those. And then I worked on finishing up the Royal Society paper. And I think in one of our last Cognition Futures meetings, I went over the paper as it stood at that time, a year before it was finished, because I had to go through the rounds of reviews and had to make changes. So it looks actually quite different from what we had read through. I mean, not quite different, but there are a lot of changes that I had to make for review to satisfy reviewers and to flesh out a lot of things. So what you see there is the outcome of that process. And then they sat on it for a couple months while they got the special issue together. So we actually got it accepted last October, but it was they had to finish up the special issue because they wanted to release it as a single issue. So I think it's nice that way because everyone can see the whole thing in its totality. And you have a lot of great authors in there. You have Douglas Hofstadter, who of course is a class of cognitive scientists. Of course, Adam Safron and Michael Levin organized the special issue. You have a lot of people from active inference. David Haas is one of the people who developed the world models concept in AI. David Krakauer is a complexity science person, and Jesse is very obsessed with some of the work that he's doing. And then Josh Tenenbaum, we've talked about him a lot, MIT cognitive science person. Melanie Mitchell is a AI person, but she goes way back to working with Hofstadter on symbolic processing. So a lot of very heavy cognitive science bent to this volume as well. And so I don't think there's an explicit paper in the special issue that talks about the cognitive science dimension to this. But there definitely is, if you look at the papers. The world models concept. What they're trying to do in this issue is flesh out the world models concept. And so that involves a lot of things that you have to go to cognitive science to understand. So for example, goals in the structure of experience. That's a paper that kind of goes through the idea of goals and goal-oriented behavior. You have things like narrative world models, which is experiential things. So there's a phenomenology component. I don't think they cite a lot of the phenomenology literature, as we talked about it in the group. A lot of linguistic stuff. thinking about large language models, but then, of course, thinking just more general in terms of linguistics and the linguistic contributions to cognitive science. So yeah, I would go through these and look at some of the themes that they kind of hit on. I think there are a lot of themes in here that are very relevant to modern cognitive science. And it doesn't have necessarily anything to do with artificial intelligence. It's been like, because cognitive science, one of the main themes probably from the 80s on was this idea of the brain as a computer, the metaphor. But more than the metaphor, people actually kind of doing computational models and experiments. So that's kind of maybe where some of this stuff is coming from, or some of it's rooted in. This is, again, like, I like this kind of revisiting that in the modern context and updating.
Even this group, like it could be the Cognition Futures Reading Group again. I kind of would be open to a more synthetic name. I'm super interested in to have all of you guys, leading a discussion group series. Even internally, I'm like, are we reopening the CFRG, which had this like wonderful 80 plus episodes run? Like one of my favorite moments, I took I think it's my Facebook cover photo still, is a bench by the Charles River in the Esplanade, Back Bay Esplanade, and we just got off of one of these calls about like OREL or something back in the day. That was a really wonderful moment of time. But I also feel, if Amanda, you pick up exactly where you left off, work on this position paper, or
Oh yeah.
here we go, I got it. And the website is slowly getting better and better, but this presentation and the embodied neurophenomenology approach, I don't know how much you want to pick all that stuff up again.
I had to remind Jesse last Saturday about the paper pyramid, if Amanda remembers that. Because I don't know where we are with that. That's kind of an illustration of the different papers we'd like to produce. We did do the paper that is in Royal Society A. And then we did put out a few papers or presentations at the Active Inference Institute Symposium. So the Active Inference Institute, which many of you might know, is run by, what's his name, Friedman. It's an endeavor where we get a bunch of people from the Active Inference Institute, people interested in active inference. And we've done 2 big presentations in that area, and it kind of meshes together like cybernetics, cognitive science, and all that. And there have been a few. One was directly addressing the 1943 paper. The other one was addressing spatial cognition and some of the mechanisms thereof. And there was one paper that came out of that, one preprint. Probably put another preprint out before this year's symposium. And then this year's symposium, I'm not sure what we're going to do for that as a presentation. We'll probably come up with a different topic still to visit. So there are a lot of opportunities there to kind of advance. So basically what I've been doing is I've been synthesizing a lot of the things we talked about in like science, cybernetics, and kind of pulling that together into different artifacts, basically. And so I think that's needed. I think it's good to have a lot of ideas thrown up in the air, but at some point you have to catch them. And if you don't catch them, then they fall on the ground. We don't want to do that so much. So that's something we can think about. We don't need to go back and do everything in the paper pyramid, but just reevaluate and say, is this worth doing?
Hey, Morgan. And yes, the forever challenge of the twirly birds falling in the air. That's like classic OREL Cognition Futures lore of like the twirly bird. Like I should make that like a t-shirt.
That's a pretty image. I used to collect them as a kid. We throw them, we put them in the bucket and just throw it off the balcony and watch the wind take most of them away.
That's exactly what it's like, really. And we have these ideas, so what do you do with it?
Remember, somewhere in Notion is like a list of active questions, I think we called it, which is exactly this. It's like to answer that question would be a nice little paper.
I know Avery kind of did an overview of their interests at large. We had a really interesting conversation last Friday about psychological lopsidedness, about archetypes, about relation to feedback, about specialization and creating surplus of stuff that feeds into cultural refinements and so on. That was an unplanned jam session, but I got some things to follow up there. The only other thing to mention really is my common currencies and navigation. I had this sort of broad idea project around navigating epistemic spaces and navigating physical spaces and overlaps between them, and how that could be a common currency, which is the theme of this year's Diverse Intelligences Summer Institute. I'm on the wait list for that. And then Amanda, I think, also mentioned something about Reynold Beer this past week as well. All the cards are on the table now. Let's talk about what we want to try to do.
We can elaborate more on some of my interests, but I think this fits into your transition anyways. But yeah, I would like to elaborate and make my loose idea about so I made something called allostatic kinds multiple years ago, and I would like to ground it more in phenomenology and any other, and also like David Krakauer's ideas about symmetry or asymmetry in agentic representation. I wish there was like the image you could quickly pull up, but it basically is the idea that like there's a taxonomy of the permutations of subject to subject or subject to object relations as like delineating different general themes that have commonly been actually referenced across a plethora of different cultures and reflection systems. And I think that I'd like to explore ways I can ground that in more rigorous philosophical backing. So we see where that goes. So I'd be interested in reading David Krakauer and exploring phenomenology might be related to that. But I'm generally pretty open. I just want to talk to people about interesting things regardless.
Yeah,
That's where I am.
I think there's a lot of interesting stuff, because we wouldn't know this, Amanda wouldn't know this, but Morgan and Bradley have heard me drone on about this enough. When I was going to NICWIC, another conference event, my podcast listening for that on the road trip was Sean Carroll. I think it was this one. If not, it's very similar to this one. But it was Sean Carroll's Mindscapes with David Krakauer. And it's sort of where it was my go-to reference for like what I think this, if I get my timeline right, this was sort of before. This is a very interesting explanation of Krakauer's takes on many things about teleonomic matter in a fairly accessible way. It goes into some parts of reductionism. It goes into his take on emergence towards the end. We've been having some really interesting references of symmetry breaking, and that's a big part of Krakauer's take on complexity and other things. Krakauer's teleonomic matter has to do with symmetry breaking and encoding information about the environment, his particular take on what complexity means that way. So there's a large strand of complexity, symmetry breaking, and Avery stuff that's that way. I'm also wanted to mention, I think there's something to what Avery's getting at that's sort of about the Platonic Spaces work that Levin's been doing. There's also like a conference or symposium that like if you go to Levin's YouTube, he's got a lot of things. A lot of them are with Benjamin Lyons, but there's sort of this Michael Levin, Benjamin Lyons, who's like this guy bringing a lot of econ stuff to it. Benjamin and I were in an ecological discussion group a while ago about this, one of the salons that happened a lot last year. But Michael Levin, Ben Lyons, Carl Friston was in there, but especially for the latest one, Lisa Feldman Barrett. So there's videos of Levin, Lisa Feldman Barrett, Ben Lyons, and people kind of from this Platonic Spaces symposium down the road that seem, even Froze was here too. Interesting. That makes a lot of sense. Kind of seeing these, and Resnick and these other folks, Gilchrist, you're kind of seeing these clusterings, right? So I don't know that these are all leads that we can follow. I'm not trying to pick one right now necessarily. Yes. I will pause there and then say, so we have Avery's sort of clustering of personality symmetry stuff. We have Amanda and potentially Bradley and maybe Morgan. I'm not sure if you're properly in any of these categories or not. And I know you didn't see this from the early stuff.
I was just going to say that sometimes I listen to the Platonic Spaces and I always feel like I'm missing part of the conversation or prerequisites for Platonic Spaces discussion. I mean, even though I know that they're kind of meeting and discussing for the first time. So
It is an arena that I have not yet fully ventured into, but only been a like I've been across the road from the stadium and looked in and heard stuff. I don't know yet either. So maybe that's sort of a not quite gather your party before venturing forth moment in the D&D old school Baldur's Gate sense or whatever. But that's a new land we've yet to really explore. Because I don't know how much more time people have, but we have like 13 minutes for the top of the hour. There's all sorts of stuff we can go through. And I think maybe in future meetings, I'll try to present some relevant stuff. Should we go there? But in terms of like positively what we'd want to do next, I know Men has mentioned the Raja stuff, Wherefore Art Thou, Dynamical Cognitive Science, and the Randall Beer cybernetic stuff. Would you be interested in leading a discussion about any of those next time, Amanda? Or what are you feeling about doing those things?
I read the Raha paper that was mentioned during a Saturday morning meeting.
Yes.
I read it. I had some very general questions that I think were basically foundational questions of this reading group. How do we explain cognition? Basically, this paper talks about the dynamical hypothesis, and the Raha paper is an introduction to a set of papers that all deal with dynamical science in cognitive science. And so, yeah, it just left me with very big questions. How would a dynamical systems theory style explanation fit into the larger puzzle that might involve other explanation types like cellular automata or synergetics, these very abstract formalisms that we've encountered? Like, how could they all fit together? And how do those things contrast with what the Raha paper calls orthodox cognitive science, also very closely related to cybernetics? I did start to read the Randall Beer paper that is a part of that issue. I didn't finish it, but we could read that for next time. I basically just missed the reading group. I know we want to have some concrete projects that we can share. We want to have more presentations and things that we've worked on that we can put out, but I just reading something that we all found interesting and chatting about it. And
that will come. Our main course will be discussing that topic next week, perhaps.
I'm interested in the allostatic kinds project. I feel like a few years ago, I heard that term dozens of times when we would chat, and I was never a part of the group that was really working on it. But whenever it came up, I was like, oh, I want to hear more. So I don't want to offload any meeting facilitation onto others, but I would love to hear more about that too.
Cool. Yeah, I think I can review and make basic attempts to. It's been a while since I've looked into it, so I can review and re-solidify it. I might even do a mini presentation. I don't think it's that dense yet, so I should be able to just quickly run over it. But I think spending some time researching and solidifying would be good. Yeah.
So here's what I'll propose for what should we all do before next week. But Avery can flesh out some of that stuff. I'm going to send an email to everybody. We'll hear something from Avery. And if I can pull some of the ideas I mentioned here into a coherent form to say more about them, I'll do that. Otherwise, I'll look at some of the past. Ye old Cognition Futures Reading Group. So that's our little reunion for now. We cut out a lot of administrative discussion and other talks about logistics and things. But we'll likely have this as a regular recurring meeting on Wednesdays and hopefully publish it later on during the weeks. If you're interested in these type of things, we will be making as many of these sessions public as possible. That's what we've been doing for some time through the Orthogonal Lab, old archives. Now that JOPRO is where it is now, much more able to do that on our channel. So please subscribe to that and follow us on Substack and such. Outside of that, we do have a few internships as well, although there aren't many that are open now on the JOPRO's opportunities page. This is coming in at sort of mid-June, so we're kind of set for summer. But we will be developing more things, especially as the next round opens up in fall. So if you're interested in potentially doing some internship along these kind of topics and projects that are much more structured than this conversation has been, please reach out. Otherwise, we'd love to have you be part of the conversation here, and we'll host more of them and hopefully have some special guests ahead too. So take care. Thank you for joining, and please follow us going forward, and have a good one.